Hello beautiful people. In this guide I will review every single Italian prop bomber in War Thunder. Hope you enjoy. All the bombers will be reviewed in the following manner. First I'll make some short remarks about the bomber, then there will be a pros and cons section, followed by a look at the bomb load and the defensive armament. Lastly there will be a little bit of pew pew with some final remarks. You can in general describe the Italian bombers like this. Overall, they have weak engines, so often 3 is required, and just losing one of them will severely decrease the bomber's performance. Good bomb load size with plenty of bomb load options. Good flight characteristics overall with very few surprises. All the bombers have self-sealing fuel tanks. And sadly, mediocre defensive armament with weaker machine guns. Italy starts out very strong right off the gate with this S81. As you can tell by the design, the S81 is an early to mid 30s design. But that doesn't mean that it can't do its job properly, and the S81 definitely does so. Some of the pros: very good bomb load, but I'll come back to that later. Excellent defensive armament. Very surprisingly, the S81 even has a proper ventral turret. And again, more on that later. Good flight characteristics. What you see is what you get, and that is actually pretty rare. You don't get any nasty surprises with the S81. Wing speeds is 530 km an hour. Max speed for combat and takeoff flaps is 350 km an hour. And that is just fine because that's basically over the plane's top speed anyhow. It handles quite well both at higher speeds and at lower speeds. You get airborne with just over 100 km an hour, and landing is also very pleasant with this aircraft. And also, when you're on the bombardier side, it's very stable. Whenever you use the controls, you're not getting any surprises. It's all quite slow and steady, but that's just beneficial for a bomber. No fuel tanks and outer wings. So the fuel tanks are all placed in the wing roots and the fuselage itself. And that is definitely a pro, so whenever you get hit in the wings, which are pretty large, nothing will really happen. Well, rather, they won't catch fire. So that's one thing less to worry about. Some of the cons for the S81. Slow. So if you can break 330 km an hour, you're doing just fine. Although you're only at battle rating 1.3, 330 km an hour is still sort of kind of slow in my opinion. If you get close to around 350 km an hour, you're getting this big red RPM warning across the screen. And that warning just won't go away until you either reduce speed or reduce power to around 80%. And that is actually quite annoying to look at. No retractable landing gear. Since you can't retract the landing gear, you'll have this permanent parasitic drag on the aircraft, and there's nothing you can do about it. That's also why the S81 is so slow. No armor protection. That is pretty self-explanatory. There's none. Nose over. So after a successful bombing run, you get back and you land. You have to be very careful with the brakes on the ground. Luckily with this bomber you can land very slowly, so you can touch ground with around 100 km an hour. And even then you still need to only tap the brakes. And if you're down to even 20 or 30 km an hour and you hit the brakes and you keep it down, there's a chance that you nose over. And that is actually very annoying, and definitely something to look out for. Weak engines. Most of the bombers in the Italian tech tree has 3 engines or more. And that is not a fashion statement, that's out of necessity. That means if you lose one engine completely, you already here hamper your flight performance severely. And if you get damage to a second, chances are you're not going back home again. The bomb load for the S81 is very impressive for its BR. You can either do 28 50 kg bombs, 16 100 kg bombs, 4 250 kg bombs, or even 4 500 kg bombs. For AIB, with the 16 100 kg bombs, you can kill 2 or 3 bases at your own battle rating. For ground pounding, I would also suggest that you use the 16 100 kg bombs. The TNT content of the 50 kg bombs is only 25 kg, and that is very little. That also means if you plan to go after tanks, you need to be very precise with the 50 kg bombs. You can definitely also use the S81 for ground IB. Stick to altitudes over 600 meters because you are very slow, and just use the 500 kg bombs to score some easy kills on tanks. So once fully spaded, skip the 4 250 kg bombs and the 28 50 kg bombs. Both good and bad for the waist gunner. He is alone manning 2 light machine guns, but on the other hand, it looks very cramped, so maybe it's for the better. He uses a 7.7mm British Lewis light machine gun. Rate of fire is quite poor though, only 550 rounds a minute. At least he has 500 rounds of ammo to spend. Horizontal guidance is an okay plus-minus 50 degrees, but vertical guidance is a very nice plus-minus 50 degrees, and that is quite rare for a waist gunner. In case the ventral gunner is into man-bots, he's super lucky. Normally we never see a ventral turret at this lower BR, so this is very nice. The ventral turret is equipped with 2 7.7mm Beretta Safat light machine guns. You have 500 rounds of ammo for them each, and the rate of fire is a very nice 900 rounds a minute. The turret's guidances are actually perfect. He can use the turret 360 degrees and minus 90 degrees, which means he can shoot straight down. Since this bomber does not have a turret in the nose, the ventral turret can help defend the front. The dorsal turret is placed just behind the cockpit, and here you again find 2 7.7mm Beretta Safat machine guns. Same ammo count as the ventral turret, and same rate of fire, 900 rounds a minute. He can also rotate the turret 360 degrees, and vertical guidance is -1 and +90, so he can shoot straight up. The most impressive part of the turrets is actually their coverage. I could not find a single blind spot on the S81. So with the help of the dorsal turret, the ventral turret and the waist gunner, you have complete coverage. And no matter the BR we are talking about, that is quite rare. I had just spent a single bomb killing the rest of a base before I headed towards the airfield, and then this guy showed up. And I don't know if you can see here, but there's no point where I cannot put fire on him no matter where he's attacking from, and that makes the S81's turrets really effective. With the 15 100 kg bombs I had left, I almost managed to completely destroy the enemy airfield, and that is actually very impressive. As I suggested earlier, just use the 16 100 kg bombs for basically everything in ARB. And if you look at the ticket counter, I basically won the match just killing these tanks. The 500 kg bombs have a kill radius of 11 meters against enemy tanks. That also means that you can stay a little safer and can afford dropping them from a high altitude. You're going to be a little more imprecise, but the increased kilo radius of the 500 kilogram bomb will compensate for it. At BR 1.7 we find the BR-20 bomber. In my opinion, the BR-20 is best used for ARB. You can use it for ground RB as I will show you, but yeah, it's not the greatest in that role. You have two versions of the BR-20 bomber. They have identical flight characteristics and bomb loads, but the later version has a heavy machine gun in the dorsal turret instead of the two light machine guns that the predecessor has. The nose section is also slightly changed with some different guidances for the nose gunner. Both good and bad in that regard, but that's about it. Some of the pros for the BR-20: fast. For BR 1.7 you're getting a pretty fast bomber here. You can get up to speeds of 430 km an hour, and that makes it very useful for a hit and run bomber in ARB. High structural speeds. The wings are good for almost 700 km an hour, and that is very impressive. And with that speed you can basically outdive any fighters at this BR. The BR-20 does not have any combat flaps, but the speed of the takeoff flaps are 430 km an hour, and that is also quite high. The bomber also comes with a decent bomb load. Some of the cons for the BR-20: mediocre defensive armament. Compared to the S-81, this is actually pretty bad, but more on that later. Awful roll rate. You may think this is a smaller thing, but since you actually do need to turn from time to time, it gets annoying pretty quickly and it can get you into trouble. And once again, no armor protection for the crew at all. The BR-20's bomb load is not the best, but it's not the worst either. You can either go for 12 50 kilogram bombs, 12 100 kilogram bombs, 4 250 kilogram bombs, 2 500 kilogram bombs, or 2 800 kilogram bombs. The way I use it in ARB is just to pick the 2 800 kilogram bombs and just head for 2 different bases, and then return, diving towards my home, and that's about it. Rinse and repeat. For ground RB you have more options though. You can either go for the 4 250 kilogram bombs, 2 500 kilogram bombs, or 2 800 kilogram bombs. Depending on how adventurous you want to be in ground RB, either go for the 4 250 kilogram bombs or the 2 800 kilogram bombs. The ventral gun position is sadly not a turret anymore, but it looks more like a car's booster seat actually, more than anything else. The gun is using an Italian 7.7mm light machine gun, ammo 500, with luckily high rate of fire, 900 rounds a minute. The horizontal guidance is not very good, with only plus minus 20 degrees. Vertical guidance is a little better, minus 50 and plus 10. The dorsal turret also uses 2 Italian light machine guns, and he has a horizontal guidance of 360 degrees. Vertical guidance is minus 5 and plus 90. And luckily, the way the tail is designed means that he can use the minus 5 degrees of the turret to good effect, because he more or less has an unobstructed view to the rear, so he can basically attack anything coming from behind, and what he cannot see, the ventral gunner can pick up. In the nose we also find the light machine gun. The horizontal guidance is actually pretty nice with minus 60 and plus 90. Vertical guidance is an okay plus minus 40 degrees. The BR-20's 800 kilogram bomb has 357 kilograms of TNT in it, and that's enough to destroy a base even in up tier. And because of the poor roll rate and turn rate, I don't suggest that you go ground pounding with this bomber. Just stick to altitude, deliver the 2 bombs and return. As I mentioned earlier, the nose gunner's horizontal guidance is actually quite useful, as you can see here. What I'm using here is also a BR-20 bomber, but this one is called M1 instead of DR-20. And this version does not have 2 light machine guns in the dorsal turret, but instead a heavy machine gun. And I think you can see it here. This is basically as hard as I can turn. And it's only when the turn is almost complete that the plane kind of flips around and actually responds. At battle rating 2.3, we find the SM-79. It's a very capable frontline/torpedo bomber, and you get access to 5 different versions of it in War Thunder, ranging from battle rating 1.7 to 2.3. 4 of the 5 are basically identical when it comes to the platform itself, the only difference being the defensive armament, and in one single case, one is faster than the others. The very last of the SM-79s is actually Romanian, or rather it was ordered by the Romanians but built by the Italians. And that is the only SM-79 with 2 instead of 3 engines. But they basically all have the same performance and bomb load. Some of the pros for the SM-79. The SM-79 has a decent bomb load, and 2 of the 5 versions are able to carry a torpedo. Fast. The bomber is pretty fast and you can reach speeds up to 430 km an hour. Good flight characteristics. The wings of the SM-79 rip at 540 km an hour. Combat flaps and takeoff flaps are around 300 km an hour, and that's just fine. The bomber handles very well, both at higher speeds and lower speeds, and is easy to land. Decent defensive armament, but more on that later. Offensive armament. 4 out of the 5 SM-79s has an offensive 12.7mm heavy machine gun just above the cockpit firing forward. Some of the cons for the SM-79s. All the defensive armaments on the SM-79s have pretty limited firing arcs, and sadly you often need to maneuver the bomber itself in order to use one of the defensive machine guns in order to attack somebody chasing you. No armor protection. Only 1 out of the 5 SM-79s has access to armor protection at all, and that is pretty bad. The bomb load capacity of the SM-79s is kind of useful, but it's not very heavy though. You can either go for 12 50 kilogram bombs, 12 100 kilogram bombs, 5 250 kilogram bombs, 2 500 kilogram bombs, or a single torpedo. For ARB, I would either go for the 12 100 kilogram bombs, or for base bombing, the 5 250 kilogram bombs. For Grounder B, the obvious choices are either the 5 250 kg bombs or the 2 500 kg bombs. There's no reason whatsoever to pick the 12 50 kg bombs. The rear section of the SM-79 is super busy, and you basically have the two waist gunners and the ventral turret gunner smelling each other's farts, up close and personal. The two waist gunners are sadly equipped with a Lewis light machine gun. It has a poor rate of fire at only 550 rounds a minute. Horizontal guidance is also not very good, plus minus 35 degrees, and vertical guidance is even worse, minus 15 and plus 40, and that is not very good. Smelling the waist gunner's farts, we find the ventral gunner position. He uses a 12.7mm Beretta Safard heavy machine gun, fire rate 700 rounds a minute, and the ammo capacity is 500 rounds. In general, the Italian heavy machine guns are not really that good, and they are definitely behind their counterparts both from America and from Russia. The gun's horizontal guidance is very limited with plus minus 10 degrees, vertical guidance is minus 60 and plus 10. Just behind the cockpit, we find the dorsal turret gunner. Arguably, the dorsal turret gunner is the most important position on this aircraft, but sadly he has very limited firing arcs, just like I talked about in the con section. Horizontal guidance is a very meager plus minus 30 degrees, and vertical guidance is plus 70 degrees. So often, whenever you need to use this gun, you actually have to move the aircraft itself and barely the gun. Ending on a positive note, here above the cockpit we find the offensive heavy machine gun. It's also a Beretta. You have 350 rounds of ammo, and that's actually enough. And this heavy machine gun can both be very entertaining and extremely useful, both in ARB and Ground RB. The SM-79AS and SM-79BIS TM, both sitting at battle rating 2.3, are able to carry torpedoes. Of course, it's most useful in naval battles, but whenever you find a body of water in ARB, it's definitely fun to try out. Here I'm using the 5 250 kg bomb option, and that's just enough to kill 2 bases. This is the SM-79 BIS/TM version. The BIS version is the only one with armor protection. The waist gunners have switched out their crappy Lewis light machine guns for heavier 12.7mm Beretta machine guns. But because the heavy machine guns take up more room, the ventral turret gunner position has been eliminated, and that's not very good, but it's a trade-off. Once you have the SM-79 BIS unlocked, it's definitely the go-to for every situation, and it's the best aircraft of all of them. You both get the benefit of arm protection, and all the defensive machine guns are heavy. At battle rating 3.0, we find the coolest looking of the Italian bombers, the Z1007 BIS Series 5. Z1007, that kind of sounds cool too. It's a very cool looking aircraft, and it also turns out to be a pretty good bomber. We have access to two different versions of this aircraft, one sitting at battle rating 2.7 and the other at 3.0. The only difference between the two models are the paint scheme, and the 3.0 version has a different tail section and is a tiny bit faster, but that's about it. The Z1007 is an improvement over the SM79 series in basically every single way. It is faster, it can carry more bombs, and the defensive armament has better coverage. Some of the pros for the 1007: good flight characteristics. The 1007 share the SM79's wing rip speed with 530 km an hour. You do not have any combat flaps, but the takeoff flaps rip speed is pretty high with 400 km an hour. This speed has also gotten a bump up, now you can fly 450 km an hour. Many bomb load options. And this is something to be seen, and you'll see that in just a minute. Decent defensive armament. The armament is an improvement over the SM79 series, but that doesn't really say much. But unfortunately you have lost the offensive heavy machine gun. Armor protection. The pilot is protected with bulletproof glass, and his seat is also protected. There's also armor protection around the rear section of the aircraft where 3 of the gunners are located. And some of the cons for the Z1007. Rear gunners are all bunched up. And this is nothing new, this issue persists with a lot of the Italian bombers. Luckily this section is protected with some light armor plates, but if you receive a couple of 20mm shells, you'll take off 75% of your gunners right there. And the bomber being at battle rating 3.0 means you're going to run into cannon-armed fighters all the time. No web. When you reach 100% on your engines, that's basically what you get. There's no web available. Engine overheating. Whenever you're on a map with a warmer climate, you can definitely see that the engines overheat quickly. And it's not because you're using web all the time, because you don't have access to that at all. External bomb load. Although you can carry several hundred kilograms worth of TNT more than the SM79 series, most of that bomb load unfortunately sits on external bomb racks. And moreover, you drop the bombs in your bomb base first, which means the bombs that are actually sitting externally and increase drag is being dropped last and in pairs. As you can see, you have plenty of bomb load options, and some of them actually look pretty confusing. And the confusion is due to the bomb bay layout. If you try to look at the bomb load at the bottom, you'll see one 800 kg bomb and 5 50 kg bombs. And the 800 kg bomb will occupy one part of the internal bomb bay, and the 3 50 kg bombs the other. And it's due to the bomb bay's long and narrow layout that some of the bomb bay options looks kind of odd. The largest bomb load you can carry is about 1100 kilograms of TNT, and that is the top one. The 4 250 kg bombs and the 12 100 kg bombs. Generally, I prefer using a lot of smaller bombs and then maybe a couple large bombs attached to that bomb load. That way I can macro manage the bomb load and avoid wasting TNT on bases. In this uncomfortable looking ventral position, we find a heavy machine gun. Horizontal guidance is plus minus 30 degrees, vertical guidance is minus 60 and plus 5. The horizontal guidance of 30 degrees is still rather poor, but compared to the SM79's 10 degrees for the ventral turret position, this is much better. This rear compartment is still super cramped. Here we find some cloned waist gunners, and just out of frame below the camera is the ventral gunner. For some reason that only Mussolini knows, these two waist gunners have been downgraded. In the previous reviewed SM79 BIS, the waist gunners had heavy machine guns. Instead, we only find some Beretta light machine guns. The horizontal guidance is minus 50 and plus 38 degrees. And vertical guidance minus 20 and plus 40. That is pretty nice though, but I would still have preferred the heavy machine guns. In the dorsal turret we do not find a Beretta heavy machine gun, but a Scotty heavy machine gun. The Scotty heavy machine gun has a slightly higher rate of fire than the Beretta heavy machine gun. Here you find 750 rounds a minute, compared to the Beretta 700 rounds a minute. The turret can rotate 360 degrees, and the vertical guidance is 0 and plus 60 degrees. Considering that most dorsal turrets have a vertical guidance of plus 90 degrees, the plus 60 degrees you find here is pretty bad. This game was an RPG game, and I think it was around 3.7 or 4.0. With that in mind, I knew I needed about 10 50 kilogram bombs in order to kill a base. From the time I was over the target, I basically had a fighter on me all the time. So for this mission, there was just not a quiet moment. So I was pondering what to do next, and I decided to actually head back in order to bomb the second base. I thought the bomber would make it. Although the 1007 is sleek and fast looking, it's still a bomber and it reacts like a bomber, but it's still very useful in ground RB. We have arrived at the last bomber, the P-108B Series 2, sitting at battle rating 3.7. In War Thunder we have 3 planes using the P-108 airframe. 2 of them are sitting in the bomber tree, the P-108B Series 1 at battle rating 3.3, and the one we're looking at, the P-108B Series 2 sitting at battle rating 3.7. The Series 1 has weaker engines than the Series 2 model, and it also has less armor protection. On the other hand, the Series 1 has a nose turret with a heavy machine gun, while the Series 2 has no weapons protecting the front at all. The third plane using this airframe is the infamous P-108A Series 2, and that plane has been redesignated as a strike aircraft. The defensive turrets are still here, but they removed the bomb bay. Instead, they installed a 102mm cannon in its nose. I made a now older video trying to spade this thing, and I did manage it, but yeah, it was interesting. In case you're interested, you can find it right up there in the corner. Some of the pros for the P-108B, very large bomb load for the BR, and more on that later. Unusual defensive armament. The P-108 has 4 remote-controlled heavy machine guns facing the rear, and you basically don't see something like this until you meet the B-29. Good flight characteristics for a heavy bomber. Wing speed is 515 km an hour, while combat flaps and takeoff flaps have a rip speed of 400 km an hour. Top speed is 445 km an hour, and that is very nice for a heavy bomber. The P-108 does not have any nasty surprises for you control-wise, and it also handles very well at lower speeds. And some of the cons for the P-108, big target. And that is self-explanatory, enough said. No armament covering the front. Not many heavy bombers, or bombers at all, lack defensive armament covering the front completely. And not finding this on the largest bomber in the Italian tech tree is kind of a problem. They had it on the Series 1, and I have no idea why they removed it on the Series 2. All gunners are in the same location. And once again, we not only find some of the gunners, but all of the gunners in one single location. Although the compartment has some armor protection, if you get hit by a couple of 20mm shells, you're losing all of your gunners at once. Fuel tanks and wings. The P-108 is a large aircraft, and that aircraft has large wings, and in those large wings we find large fuel tanks. And it does not take a lot of incendiary bullets to set those pretty big wings on fire. First things first, the P-108 gets brownie points for a cool way of opening the bomb bay doors. For a bomber sitting at battle rating 3.3 and 3.7, this is a very large bomb load. You can either carry 34 50kg bombs, 34 100kg bombs, 7 250kg bombs, or 7 500kg bombs. You can also choose to either carry 2 or 3 torpedoes. You can drop the maximum amount of TNT by using the 34 100kg bombs. With that bomb load, you can drop 1.7 tons of TNT. In the second place, we find the 7 500kg bombs. With that bomb load, you can drop 1.5 tons of TNT. As I said earlier, I prefer dropping a lot of smaller bombs. That way I can micromanage the amount of TNT I'm dropping on each base, and thereby maximizing the amount of TNT I can drop. But of course, that's not for everyone, and if you just wanna drop some bombs and get away, just use the 7 500kg bombs. But if you calculate it correctly, you can with the 34 100kg bombs kill up to 3 or 4 bases in full up tier. At least, and thank the makers, we are back to having a fully functional ventral turret. It can rotate 360 degrees, and vertical guidance is minus 90 degrees. It would have been great if the ventral turret would have had 2 heavy machine guns, but I guess one will suffice. In this shot we see the 2 waist gunners, and just behind them you can just see some armor plates. And behind those armor plates we find the 2 gunners controlling the remotely controlled heavy machine guns you find in the wings. Unfortunately, once again we only here find light machine guns. I don't know why these waist gunners could not have had heavy machine guns instead. Their horizontal guidance is minus 40 and plus 30. And vertical guidance is minus 35 and plus 25, and that is okay, especially since we now have a ventral turret. In this shot we see the 2 gunners operating the remotely controlled turrets. and you can see one of the turrets on the outer engine's engine nacelle. The turrets have two Beretta heavy machine guns with 300 rounds of ammo each. Horizontal guidance is ± 95 degrees, and vertical guidance is -5 and +85 degrees. So if you attack from behind and above, these heavy machine guns can really help out. But unfortunately they cannot rotate 360 degrees, so they cannot help if you are attacked from the front. The best you can do is show your ass to the enemy so you can really use all these heavy machine guns, otherwise you can be sort of screwed. As I mentioned earlier, I prefer using a lot of smaller bombs to get the job done. This way I can micromanage how much TNT I'm using on each base. In this instance, I was in an up-tier match, so I dropped 4 bombs individually, and then I had set the series to 6 bombs, so 10 bombs per base, and that was enough. I found out that I actually made a mistake. Instead of having to use 10 bombs on a base, 8 would have been enough. That way I could have saved 6 bombs or 150 kilograms worth of TNT. And with that little saving, I could have put a dent on the main airfield. As a heavy bomber, you have the luxury of starting at a higher altitude than a regular bomber would. But in a bomber like the P-108, I don't think that's enough, so often I choose to side climb a little. And it doesn't have to be crazy, you don't have to go way out to the sides of the map, just away from the center. And I would say climb to either 5,500 or 6,000 meters in order to stay just a little more safe before you head towards the bases. Another benefit is that if you wait a little, all the fighters will be tangled up with each other and hopefully nobody will notice you. Of course that strategy does not always work, and some players just really like to kill bombers. These are my recommendations for the Italian bombers. As you can see, there's a yay and a nay list. The Italian bombers are kind of special in a way though. I have a yay on every single model of the Italian bomber, but not the versions. So I'm only going to go through the yay section, and the nay section will consist of all the versions of the bombers that I'm going to skip or suggest that you skip also. S-81. It's probably the best entry bomber of any nation. Except for the speed, every other aspect of it is very, very nice. BR-20. Either of the BR-20s work. It really comes down to a preference about the dorsal turret. You can either go for the 2 light machine guns or 1 heavy machine gun. With the enemy planes you're going to face, I prefer the 2 light machine guns with a high rate of fire. I don't really see the need for the slower firing 1 heavy machine gun here. I will suggest though that you only use the BR-20 for ARB and hit and run bombing. SM-79 BIS/TM. Research and buy all the SM-79s, but only spade and use the BIS version. If you want a faster model, you can use the AS version sitting just before the BIS. It's the fastest of the SM-79 models with 480 km/h. But it lacks the armor protection and heavy machine gunners that the waist gunners have in the BIS model. The last twin-engine model, the SM-79B, has a little stronger twin-engine design with a tiny boost in speed, but you lose the forward-firing heavy machine gun, and it has no armor protection either. And the waist gunners don't have access to heavy machine guns, only light machine guns. Z-1007 BIS Series 5. This is a good and fast bomber for BR 3.0. Research and buy the Series 3 version, but there's no need to use it and spade it. Just wait for the Series 5. The Series 5 has a different tail design compared to the Series 3, and with the redesign, your dorsal turret has better coverage. P-108B Series 2. And once again, it's up to personal preference. With the Series 1 sitting at battle rating 3.3, you lose some speed and some armor protection for the remote turret gunners. But on the other hand, you do gain a nose turret which the Series 2 does not have. The size of the bomb load for the 2 versions are the same. That was about it for this guide. If you like the content, do me a favor and like, subscribe and leave a comment. I've added links in the video description below, both for other relevant videos on the channel, but also for more direct ways for you guys to support the channel if you wish to do so. Thank you for watching, and until next time, remember to deploy your die breaks. Have a good one.